Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Business Fusion. Today, we're starting our series of leadership, specifically how to build the best teams. And we are honored to have with us Dr. Lizette Ojeda. Dr. Ojeda, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we're going to focus today with my co-host Carlos, of course, who you all know by now, a little bit about diversity and inclusion and different aspects of, what it takes to build one of the best teams out there for leaders. So, but Dr. Ojeda, could you please give us a little background on you, your how you started, your desire to get your PhD and so on?
Oh my goodness. How much time do we have? I'm actually the first person in my family to even go to high school. So it's been an interesting journey, lots of different paths, bumps in the road, but here I am, and I'm here on a mission to help others be able to reach their fullest potential reach their next level of success with more confidence and a lot less stress. And so really being able to allow those who represent the world be the ones also leading it in the place we work, and especially. So that's my passion.
Terrific.
Fantastic. And you're a doctor, your PhD under some what?
Oh, yeah. So I'm a psychologist. I'm also a professor, behavioral scientist. So I teach this stuff, research this stuff, publish this stuff, and consult on this stuff.
Wow. So definitely a lot of background and a lot of knowledge. You teach right now at which university or?
Yeah, I teach at Texas A&M University.
Oh. Wow. Fantastic. Local gal. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh,
Go
yeah,
Aggies. That's right. Well, today we wanted to start like I said, the series for leadership. And one of the things that we know, especially when it comes to leadership nowadays, and is so perhaps in vogue, but it should always be something to be considered, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we wanted to get your perspective on that aspect of it, or maybe coming not so much from the business perspective, but from the individual. Maybe you've worked with some individuals, helped them in their journey, and what experiences can you share?
Yeah. Well, diversity, equity, inclusion, it's all lumped together, right? Diversity is the representation of diverse people of different genders, sexual orientations, sexual identities, gender identities, religion, ability, the diversity of human existence. Mm-hmm. Equity is making sure that everybody has an equitable, not equal is different, equitable opportunity to succeed. Mm-hmm. To be able to reach their full potential where they are given the opportunity to work. And there are some people who have different needs, and being able to identify what those are and help them be able to have what they need to be successful. Not because it's a handout, but because it's something that is needed for equitability to be put in place. And inclusion is that belonging piece, because you can have representation through diversity. You can have things that are equitable. But if they don't feel like they have a voice at the table, then a lot of the other stuff loses its effect. Yeah, so I really focus on the individual, because at the end of the day, individuals are what makes up a unit, an organization, a business, a corporation, a company. And putting people before profit is what's going to help the company reach its fullest potential with the people who were put in place to work there and help it move forward. And so I often tell people that yes, you are a professional, but you're also a partner, a parent, and most importantly, a person. And so how do you want to be able to show up and do your best work as your whole self? Feel like you don't have to hide parts of who you are. Even if you get some messages about how you're supposed to be in corporate America, for example. I remember, I'll tell you, one of my first very important business meetings, I was at a dinner and I didn't even know which fork to use. I'm like, why do we have so many here? Because it's just not something that I grew up with. And so that's another form of diversity. We often don't talk about first generation college graduates. social economic status, which affects certain groups more, but it that's something that is an issue across the line. And so thinking about inclusion, it's ethnicity, it's race, it's gender, but the intersectionality piece, I think, is where we really need to focus on, because you can't just put people in a box and make assumptions about them based on what stands out to you about them. So like right now, you can choose to apply a Latina stereotype, or you can apply an assumption about women in general, or Latinos in general, or millennials. I'm on the tail end of that, by the way. So I barely made the cutoff. So the intersectionality piece is I think is really important, that is still missing to help people feel like they belong as their whole intersectional self, not just a piece of it.
So I think some of the points we've covered here 100% would be beneficial for any leader organization, especially understanding, look, let's be honest, a business is in business to make money, and leaders have to be able to execute whatever strategy the business needs, either develop it and execute it, or do both, to have the financial gain. Having said that, what advice or what challenges have you seen individuals that may be in leadership roles, or what can they do to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion? Because one thing is to know it. Another thing is, what behavior do I need to have to embrace that and actually attract it, so it's not a fake way of doing business, if you will?
Mm-hmm. So people produce the profit. People make up, the outcomes.
Start with that.
Yeah. And then, I mean, it's been shown over and over, the more diverse a group of people, the more a company is profitable. Like the car Nova. Nova means doesn't go. Like if there was just somebody on that marketing team or whatever team was involved with naming the vehicle that way, or if they had just more diversity on there, they probably would have saved themselves millions of dollars.
As a matter of fact, funny you mentioned that story, because I think that Nova vehicle back in the 70s, and I could be wrong, but I think they had to rebrand it in the Caribbean, and they called it the Jíbaro. Like the Jíbaro, which is like the warrior, right? Because Nova in Spanish means it doesn't go anywhere. So right. Who wants to buy a vehicle that doesn't go anywhere, right? But if you branded it as Jíbaro, they're like, yo, you're a warrior. I believe that story, don't quote me on it, but I remember hearing about it. But I take your point. In my experience, for instance, and I don't know if you guys agree with this or not, but I think if you remain curious to discover things without judging, may be an attribute or a personality trait that a leader may have, to be able to say, like, well, let me hear, let me experience. And so that way I can be more aware of differences. I know for a fact that Carlos and I, having lived overseas in different cultures, we had to be not just curious, but also flexible to embrace those differences and say, still, I am who I am, but I also accept some of the things that you are. I may not agree with them, but I'm aware. I don't know. I don't want to speak for you, Carlos, but I think it's being the right.
I think it's a great point. I think, and you could, we can use that same logic in the different companies in which we've worked, even if it was just within the United States, right? Whenever you're moving into a new culture, right, part of what your role is to adapt to it. But part of what you should be trying to do as well is also preserve those things within you that have made you successful, right? It's the conflict almost between those two things that makes it really, really interesting. I personally, have felt that many times, right? And for me, it's always been that kind of a struggle of, okay, what do I keep about myself versus what do I adapt to in order to kind of get along? And I suspect that that's a little bit of, the experience of people that are new to any country or any culture more broadly. And just kind of, going back onto the point that I think was intended by the question, if we're advising, people who are thinking about setting up a company or thinking about a new department or thinking about going after a new product, right? What are some things or what is some advice that you might say to them that they should really pay attention to in building the team that are going to build the profit? Like what are some quick things that you would say, hey, always do these things? Go ahead. Give us some thoughts.
That's a good question. So what comes to mind is looking at it from a curiosity perspective and an openness perspective, and being able to be open to new ideas and new ways of doing things so that you can foster innovation. And so taking an inventory of what your strengths are, what your skills are, what you bring to the table, and putting it out there and seeing, okay, what might be some gaps that need to be filled and who might be able to fill those. Or it might even be difficult for you to know what the gaps are in the first place because it's difficult to be objective
yes.
In that evaluation. And so that is an even more important reason why having diverse perspectives, diverse cultures, diverse upbringings, backgrounds is so important, because together you're stronger.
Sure.
And so that's something that I would definitely say is taking an inventory.
Take inventory. Tick. Got it. What else?
Well, curious, take inventory. So that's two.
Okay.
Yeah. Take inventory. Be curious. Oh, okay. The affinity bias. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Explain that. Affinity bias. Okay.
So we tend to give opportunities to those we
People like us
are familiar with, those people who we know, like, and trust. And we automatically go towards people who look like us. And so if we're not intentional about that and keep that at the forefront, then we're going to pick duplicates of us. And so going outside of your realm of comfort, familiarity, and that's where that openness comes in, that curiosity of, like, what else is out there? Where else can I go?
Love it. So be aware of the affinity bias and try to pick people who don't look like you, don't have the same background as you, don't sound like you, may have some different ideas than you. You're saying that's a good thing.
Yeah, have different ideas, because if you have people who are all strategic, but nobody is empathetic, you're not going to have someone in there who can sense when something is missing. There's so many different strengths that need to be considered for a given goal to be able to come to fruition.
So with those things in mind, and in the spirit of building, let's say, the best teams, right? What advice would you have for a leader to not just collect, maybe that's the wrong word, build a diverse team, but for them to engage? Because we mentioned earlier, there are some individuals that I was like, I'm grateful to be in the room, but I may not want to be outspoken because maybe I'll just say something stupid. What advice would you have for leaders to kind of pull that out?
Seek to understand before you seek to be understood. So, okay, here's the room. What am I gathering here? What am I sensing here? Rather than you just going out there and speaking to them and putting yourself out there and sharing your ideas and your agenda. But, like, where are people at right now? Because you can be talking to people and there's presenteeism as an issue, right? They're there, but they're checked out. And so you're wasting your time. And so noticing patterns, who tends to be taking up most of the space, who hasn't contributed, who's more introverted, who's more extroverted, who's maybe the new kid on the block that needs to feel, who might still be testing the waters and needs to be invited to the table and to speak at the table until they get comfortable, until they test the waters and realize, yeah, it's safe for me to speak up.
It's a great point, because it's not just about getting them, you got to keep them. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And once they're there, you want to engage them as deeply as you can in order to keep them. Is that fair?
Oh, yes. I always say it's not about just recruitment or promotion. It's and helping them survive there. It's helping them thrive there.
Mm-hmm.
Engagement and thrive. It reminds me a lot of the a prior podcast we had, Carlos, about sales, which is, managing teams and sales. Is like, you can recruit the best salespeople per se, but they have to be able to be on the same at the same level for you to have an optimal team. Otherwise, you're going to have the alpha personalities come up here and everybody else is going to lag. So as a leader, I guess you have to bring that higher so everybody benefits. And I think you're saying to some extent that, which is with diversity, is not just include them, but also help them blossom.
Mm-hmm. Even getting a sense of what the values of people are. So if somebody values autonomy and somebody else values teamwork, well, there might be some conflict there, but with that information, how can we actually use the strengths that come from someone being autonomous and being able to work very well independently to someone who works best when they're working in a group? How can we merge that rather than saying one is right, one is wrong?
It's a great point. I was, as you were saying that, I was reflecting a bit on some teams that I've led in the past and how it is that, being in the position that I was in, or given some of the work that I was doing and some of the focus that I needed to have on certain things, I didn't always do the best job, for example, of getting to know everybody on the team, right? I mean, in a typical, organizational structures, you have leaders and then you have other layers of leaders and you disperse what I'll call familiarity, right? You disperse it. And yet, my success is relying on everybody within that team. And I know that a lot of other leaders kind of feel this as well, that, they've got, all of these things to do. We've created this organizational structure in which to, manage the needs and the abilities of the team that we do have, and to do all of the things that you're talking about. And yet, those people at the farthest reaches from the main leader in that structure can often feel quite disregarded by that leader unintentionally on the leader's part. What are some things that, once again, in the vein of trying to keep the talent that you have, which I suspect is an especially important point of view right now, given the great discontent that we're experiencing, otherwise known as the Great Resignation. Do you recommend to organizational senior leaders, for example, about getting to know the people on the team?
Yeah, people want to feel like they're recognized, like their ideas matter, that even something as simple as letting them have their birthday off. It's not just a random day. It's sending a message that you as a person matters. Mm-hmm. And that's really what I keep hearing over and over. Like, I don't want this just to be a paycheck. And it gets to a point where the money they make no longer makes up for the meaning that they lack in the work that they're doing, because it's not really making the type of impact that they want. So asking them, what is meaningful work like for you? And how can we make that go up? How can we foster that for you?
What a novel idea. You're suggesting an individualized approach to people as opposed to a group approach. Try to know people at their own level, kind of what their motivations are, their needs, their wishes, their desires, their fears. What a novel concept for leaders. Yet they don't quite get it often, do they?
Well, Look, I think a lot of these points are definitely very useful and advice for a lot of the people or some of the viewers, all the viewers really. It's unfortunate that some leaders may not take that to heart and it's all just financially driven. But I agree 100% with what you said earlier, which is, look, companies would only succeed through the individuals. Yeah. And you know this, Carlos, extremely well. You know, human capital is what makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Whether you're in sales and marketing, finance, whatever, if you don't have the human capital, as we're going more and more into technology, these individuals is the true capital of your company. It's no longer the widgets. Perhaps one last question from my side. You know, what advice would you have someone that is right now in their early 20s, maybe even in their teens, considering, you know what, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can endure getting the advanced education or the level of achievement that other people have had because I just don't have the right background.
So much could go into that, several different directions, but I would start at the root. What are your beliefs about what it would mean? What do you think is not possible for you? And is that really true? Or is that what you've been told? And if it is true, how can we solve it rather than it closing the door, you closing the door on yourself? How can we find one that can open up if one doesn't for you? And sometimes, well, we're more afraid of what could happen than when it actually happens. Like if you think about it, the anticipation of how bad it can get, and then it happens, and you're like, oh, it wasn't that bad, or, well, yeah, it was bad, but I didn't die. I overcame it, and actually made me stronger. And so really helping understand what is really going on here that's holding you back, and how can we get you the resources or shift your perspective in a way that empowers you, not holds you back.
You know, it strikes me through your kind of response to that, that one of the roles that we inevitably play as managers, leaders of people, is that one of the most important things that we do is we encourage, right? We encourage people. We encourage people to step outside of their fears. We encourage them to try and do things that they've never done before. We're there along the way as they figure it out, as they make mistakes. And we know that the sort of natural tendency is that, we learn tremendously from the things that we fail at, right? I think that, too often leaders, they forget about that part. They forget about the most important role that they have often is to be the coach, right? The person who, is elevating the individual, who's putting them in the spotlight. I once had a colleague who said, leaders are the lens through which people see the organization, and the organization sees their people, right? And too often leaders don't recognize that they have that kind of vital role in really enabling people's individual success, and in doing that, enabling the broader organizational success. I get a little worried about it these days, however, especially if some of the reports are to be believed about some of the newer generations, and how it is that they're often influenced and impacted by high degrees of anxiety, high degrees of depression. First off, I believe it's real. I know several people who have quite significant issues around anxiety and depression, and it's influenced their success at work, right? Are there some things that you think organizations in general could be doing more of, or leaders could be doing more of, in order to help people who are in that sort of situation?
Normalize it. It's not a dirty little secret. Like, talk about what's available as if you were talking about the weather, as if you're talking about the potluck. Even share with someone that you're managing or leading. you know, when I was starting off, I experienced this to normalize it, because you might be surprised. They might have you on a pedestal where they think that you've never experienced anything like they are. And they'll be more likely to open up and let you know when they need a resource, not from a place of inadequacy, but from a place of being open to growing, instead of sitting there trying to figure it out, wasting time and making a mistake that's costly.
Great.
That's great advice.
Great advice. Dr. Ojeda, thank you so much for taking the time. We want to be respectful of your time as well. Thank you for doing this with us. If anybody wants to reach out to you, or are you on LinkedIn, or
I am
can
on
we share
LinkedIn.
that?
Any websites, any social media that you'd like to tell us about?
LinkedIn. Just look me up. I'll be there waiting for you.
We'll share the link with the viewers. Once again, Dr. Ojeda, thank you. Carlos, as always, a pleasure.
Likewise.
Folks, hope you enjoy this. Until next time, we want to thank you. And please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, be good and do good. See you later.